Joining us right now is the Reverend Dr. Paul Sullins. He is a senior research associate at the Ruth Institute, and he's also an esteemed sociologist and former professor at Catholic University of America. His specialization is in the research of same-sex parenting and family dynamics, and he is internationally recognized for his work on clerical sexual abuse. His recent focus in the topic of our conversation today is scrutinizing the methodological flaws in studies linking conversion therapy to suicide risks, challenging prevailing narratives in the public discourse. Thank you very much for joining us, Father Sullins.
I'm very happy to be here this morning.
There is a really big story that you were
Right.
talking about, and I very much enjoyed your talk. I wish it was longer. It was only 20 minutes long, and I was thinking, okay, this is a major talking point among the left. The major talking point of
Right.
oh, we have to be against conversion therapy. We're shocking these poor homosexuals, and they are being tortured to death. But that's not entirely true, is it, Father Sullins?
No, they claim that people go into this therapy and then they come out more suicidal. And they've claimed that on a number of studies. Where have we heard this claim before? It's with people who are thinking about transitioning with gender identity studies. And they say to parents, well, if they don't go through this, your children are going to be more suicidal. Because they don't want the children not to go through that. And here they don't want people to go through the therapy. So guess what? We get the same claim. If they go through this therapy, they're going to come out suicidal. And in both cases, the research is extremely sketchy on these claims. And so I got involved when I was invited to submit a letter pointing out some of the flaws in one of the studies that claim that persons who went through conversion therapy came out more suicidal. This study claimed that it doubled the possibility of suicidal thoughts and increased attempts of suicide by 1.7. So when I looked at the data for this study, I found something very interesting, and that is that they would report the amount of suicide attempts or suicide thoughts that a person reported, and then they would report whether or not the person had been to some sort of therapy to change their sexual orientation. But on the data, it told us when these suicide expressions occurred, and they didn't separate the expressions that occurred before the person had gone to the therapy and the expressions that happened after they went to the therapy. Well, that's a major scientific error. It's not controlling for pre-existing distress. And so they were reporting all of a person's suicidal expressions as if they were the result of SOCI, when they couldn't have been. If you're thinking suicidal thoughts and 2 years later you go to therapy, how could that therapy have caused your pre-existing suicidal thoughts? It's impossible. We've known since Aristotle that things that happen before something else can't be a cause of that later event. But they just completely ignored that. So I went into the data and I simply separated out the expressions that happened before the person went to the therapy and that happened after they went to the therapy. And I found that it was the exact opposite of making people more suicidal. It made them less suicidal. If you compare only suicidal ideation or suicidal attempts after therapy with those persons who have never been to therapy, you find that the ones who have been to the therapy have much less than 1/5 as many of those subsequent suicidal ideations. And so what they're doing is they're taking a body of persons who do experience greater suicidality. Then they go to therapy, and after the therapy, they experience much less suicidality, not only than they did before, but less suicidality than people who had ever been to the therapy. They're presenting to us a false backwards argument. It would be like saying to someone who has heart trouble, well, you shouldn't undergo heart surgery because research has shown that people who undergo heart surgery, well, can you believe it, have much higher rates of heart trouble than people who never undergo heart surgery. So if we just banned heart surgery, it would help all of these people who suffer from heart troubles. Now, you're a rational human being, so you can see the flaw in that logic. that you're banning the cure as if somehow it's causing the disease. That's the exact argument that we're getting from these LGBT
Mm,
activists in this research. And it's just false. It's a lie. And we should say, wait a minute, you're telling us the exact wrong thing. We should not ban this kind of therapy. In fact, we should promote it and
right.
support it because it's very helpful to persons who
Father,
are
we're
struggling
going
with
to go to a
same-sex
quick
attraction.
break. And when we come back, I want to finish up on this topic. I also want to go backwards a little bit and say, okay, what is conversion therapy? What exactly are we talking about whenever we say conversion therapy? What are we seeing? What is happening to these people? What are they going through? Joining us right now is Father Paul Sullins. We're talking about the situation of conversion therapy, what's known as conversion therapy, whenever people who are active homosexuals or experiencing same-sex attraction and they desire to overcome that. What is actually happening there, and are the myths around it saying, oh, people go into conversion therapy, they come out worse than they did before? Are those things true? We were talking about that, and Father Sullins gave a clear statistical look at it and showed us that it's very clearly the case that it's the opposite, that conversion therapy actually reduces suicidal tendencies. And so the question, though, is what exactly are we talking about when we say conversion therapy? Because the popular culture makes us think, okay, conversion therapy equals shock therapy. Conversion therapy equals torture. But that's not necessarily the case. Father Sullins, what exactly is conversion therapy?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's not a clear definition in the literature. People choose lots and lots of different uh, classifications of therapeutic experiences. But persons who actually try to help people with same-sex attraction reject entirely the term conversion therapy. It's become a pejorative term lobbed by the other side to scare people, and they connect it with practices that were popular back in the 1960s, mostly aversive techniques like inflicting minor elements of pain in order to be free from thoughts that you didn't want to have, that were used in lots of types of therapy. Also, electric shock therapy, which was common back in the 60s, but has been kind of fell into disuse today. Um, but people who actually try to help people like to call it change allowing therapy. It doesn't have a goal to change sexual orientation necessarily, but it's open to that if that helps someone. The goal is to help someone who struggles with same sex attractions, usually because it violates their religious convictions, like it would do for a faithful Catholic, or maybe they're in a heterosexual relationship or marriage and they want to make that work, and they want to learn how to function in those environments. Most of us have both a capacity for same-sex attraction and a capacity for opposite-sex attraction. It turns out that sexuality is pretty flexible and diverse, um, and so what happens in these therapeutic settings when they're successful, for the most part, is not so much that the same-sex attractions diminish, although that sometimes happens, but it's more that the heterosexual attractions can increase, and a person can sort of start living out of their heterosexual side rather than their same-sex side. Now, the activists like to convince us that persons who experience same-sex attractions don't have a heterosexual side, that somehow it eliminates the ability to be attracted to persons of the opposite sex. But we know that's not true. I've known that's not true for decades because I've studied these folks. I have studied the children of parents who are same-sex parents. And, most of those children are the biological offspring of one of those two parents before they entered into the relationship, which means, if you think about it, that parent must have been able to function heterosexually in a heterosexual relationship at some point in their life. And so most of them, when they will leave a heterosexual relationship to take up a same-sex relationship, they will say, well, I was denying my true self and now I'm discovering my true self.
Hmm.
But however they describe it, they were functioning in a heterosexual way and now they're functioning in a different way.
That
And many of those who do that can also change back and have changed back
Mhm.
to a heterosexual way.
You know,
Yes,
that
sir.
makes a lot of sense because there was a recent expose where someone did a secret recording of the people at Pornhub, and where they were talking about this situation here of homosexual pornography, and they were
Yeah.
saying how they would push it on people, put it in their recommended who are heterosexual, and try in the attempts to try to convert them. Of course, they're talking the market convert, but obviously in the context of pornography, if you're market converting someone, then you are
Mhm.
changing their sexual desires as well. So we very clearly see that someone's sexual desires can actually change from A to B, and it can happen
Right.
through what these people at Pornhub are doing is exposure therapy, exposing them to these things over and over again until they become desensitized to it and they become aware and until they kind of desire it, which is a
Yeah.
very obviously perverted thing. So we would assume the same thing could be happen in reverse. You can actually fix that. Father Paul, what is about the research did you find to be kind of the most impactful for the public conversation?
Well, we've talked about the discovery that undergoing this therapy did not induce higher suicide risk. That had a big impact on the therapy. We also found that most of the research in this area ignored persons who had changed. And by selecting their samples, they purposely eliminated from the sample anyone who had changed. And so the claim that someone can change sexual orientation uh, was not even allowed to be part of the discussion.
Wow. Wow, so they just completely ignored the fact they
Mhm.
did they ignore it or was it bare how was that kept out?
They purposely excluded the the uh, uh, the strength of the opposition to my findings and similar findings is embedded in the article of faith of the LGBT ideology, that it is an acceptable variation of human sexuality to be attracted to persons of the same sex. And some people are born that way and can't change. And that's the basis of their claim for political representation and privilege. That's the basis of their claim for having such a thing as a gay community and gay identity. And so if you challenge that, you're stepping on the third rail of LGBT ideology, and you induce lots and lots of a very hysterical response.
Right? That makes sense, and it also makes sense that people will try to frame it as the born this way mantra, the gay
Hmm.
gene mantra, where they were searching for the gay gene. Ultimately, it was of course not found. But if of course they're trying to make the argument that if you're born this way, then clearly it's natural to the person, and if it's
Right.
natural to the person, you can't change it. Is kind of the line of reasoning. But we know that even if someone is born in a certain way, it can change, right?
Hmm. Right. And, it threatens that argument at the root. If even one person can change sexual orientation, then it undermines the idea that no one can ever change, that it's inborn, right?
Mm.
If you have now a group of persons, you can't allow that have changed sexual orientation, you can't allow them to be heard or acknowledged because that undermines that part of the whole argument.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you very much, Father Paul Sullins. We're out of time, but we'll definitely have to
Mm.
have you back on in the future because this research, I
Okay.
think, is incredibly impactful, and I definitely want to follow what you'll be finding out and discovering over over the time. So, God bless you, Father. Could you leave us with your priestly blessing?
Yes, Adrian, God bless you, and God bless all of those who are driving to work right now. That's a great sacrifice that you make every day, in most cases for your family. And God bless you in that. May the overabundant graces of the Blessed Virgin Mary also shower on you today as you seek to do your best. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Father, and God bless you. God love you, and have a blessed day.